This is our last video in our reading and writing strategies series. In our first video, we looked at pre-reading strategies. In our last video, we looked at during reading strategies. And then for our final video today, we're looking at post-reading strategies. So there are 4 that we're going to take a quick look at today as we endeavor to help our students become better readers. So the first one is the 5-word strategy. So it starts out with a during reading aspect of it, where during the reading, students are going to mark key details or the main idea. Highlight, asterisk, underline, that kind of thing as they are reading. And then post-reading, you're going to have students select 5 words or phrases from the marked text that represent the most important information. And so they will choose, and this aspect of it being 5, and that's what the strategy is called, 5 words. Depending on the amount of text, whether it be a paragraph or maybe 5 pages or a whole chapter, you may need to adjust that number as the teacher, and obviously that's up to your discretion. But then after they have selected their 5 words or phrases, they'll record the individual responses on a form, and then they will discuss as a group. So this is what your form might look like. You have 2 columns there, the individual selections where they would list their word or phrases, and then you have your group. So once they have made they've determined their words or phrases, they get into their groups, and then they have to defend and explain why they've chosen the words or phrases that they've chosen. And then as a group, they come to a consensus on, okay, these are the 5 that we think are the most important. And then down below, there's some discussion questions. So which words can your group agree upon? Which words led to disagreements? And then how did your thinking change as the result of your discussion? So this activity, I really like it because it goes into key idea, key details, and then it helps students have to defend why they made the choices. And then if, they've got several classmates that can argue for their choices more clearly and better, they will ultimately hopefully correct any thinking they might have upon which is most important and what information is most important. And then they have to, of course, reflect on that as well. So what they agree upon, what they don't agree on, and then if their thinking changed, and then explain that there at the bottom. And then another strategy would be quick check. So this is more of a quiz type format, but you would create a multiple choice assessment using Kahoot or Quizzes, which those 2 programs they have free versions of them for teachers to use. And this also helps to gamify it, your quick check a little bit more than just giving them a half sheet of paper with 5 questions on it. But you create that assessment and then have the students read. And then after they've read, allow them to use their pre-reading and during reading notes on that Kahoot or Quizzes quiz. And then have them reflect on the outcome of the assessment. So if they did really well on it, they can be assured that their pre-reading and during reading notes are great, that they're doing really well, they were understanding what is important and what is not important, or what perhaps I should say what is least, maybe perhaps not as important as other details or the main idea. And then they reflect on that. If they're not doing well on that quick check assessment, then they can go back and identify, okay, what are they not understanding? Was it the material itself they didn't understand? Was it they didn't emphasize, they weren't clear on what is more important or most important? And you might even have students get in groups and do this reflection together as they look at what are the correct answers, where were those answers in the text, maybe even comparing and contrasting the pre-reading and during reading notes in groups to identify, if it's a understanding of content problem or if it's understanding what is most important. And then you have entrance and exit slips. This particular activity has a variety of different ways that it can be used. However, the text really recommends giving, for their entrance and exit slips, it recommends giving a targeted writing task to the students as they enter the class or even before they leave the class. That ultimately requires them to really articulate what they understand about the lesson or the reading and ultimately turn in a written response. And the text really emphasizes wording the prompt in a way to make sure that they have to really show you that they've mastered the content, and ultimately ask it in a way that helps to avoid them rewriting or just copying the text. So for example, a prompt that they gave in the text was, in your own words, without using notes, explain how a bill becomes a law. So taking away all sources after they've read, and making them really reflect on what they understood and write that down. And so as they are writing, it also helps them to perhaps identify what they did not understand. If there are gaps in a process that they've had to learn, they can identify that in their writing. So this is something that they can do either before or after classes taking place, as they're coming in, they're writing, or as they leave, they're writing. You can also, of course, these entrance and exit slips can be connected as they build off of one another. And then, of course, there's always the element of collaboration, as you or as the teacher are going to want them to perhaps compare the writing task, what one thought, what one student emphasized, or how they wrote it, and compare it to one another. And this is highly easy to tailor to different groups of students, to individuals if absolutely needed. Also, even to the content itself, as it's really only limited by the question that you're asking and having them reflect on. And so the entrance and exit slips have gotten very popular, but the text here really emphasizes having them, beyond just answering like a question in like one or two sentences, but the text really emphasized having them even write like a full paragraph or explaining something, not just giving like 1 or 2 word answers. Or, for example, using perhaps a open-ended type question or open-ended type task in order to help them reflect or to show that they understood the material. And like I mentioned a moment ago, this particular task is very easy to tailor for different students' needs. So if you have special education students that need perhaps a more simply worded question, or they need something that helps them with their level of comprehension, it's fairly simple to create differentiated slips. Also, if you have some English learners that perhaps would really struggle with some very specific vocabulary or language, you can eliminate that particular language and replace it with something that would be more accessible to them. And ultimately would provide a structure that would be accessible for their thinking. And then you can extend the learning for proficient students by moving away from perhaps a very straightforward, very literal question and providing them opportunity for analysis. You might even adapt the 5-word strategy that a student asks a student to identify the 5 words from the text that best support a historical argument. Other options might also include something that like a student to unpack specific words or phrases connected to other units of study. So there's a lot of options for using this particular strategy. And then our final strategy is the 3-2-1 activity. So after reading a text, students complete 3 increasingly complex tasks. So students record 3 responses to the first task, 2 responses to the second task, and 1 response to the final task. And there's a lot of ways that this might look for a classroom, just depending on what you desire to assess. So, for example, your task might be something where after completing a reading, you have the students write down 3 key terms, 2 key details, and 1 connection to another text. The text I read had this particular form that might be something you'd be interested in, and it emphasizes different aspects of what they might be reading about. So they could have 3 key details from the reading, 2 connections to other texts, and have them write down a question. So there's a lot of different avenues that as a teacher you could help your students, and really it just depends on the text. So perhaps some texts might have more connections that you can more easily make than others. And as you notice, they do get harder. So it does give students an opportunity to show what they know, especially with the number 3. That is typically your easiest task. So just providing 3 key details, giving students a sense of success, and then making a connection, or writing down a question. So they should be getting harder as they move through the text itself. And so that is the end of our strategies for this particular text. Thank you so much for your attention and going along with me as we learned different strategies to help our students become better readers.